At 81, I sit alone in a room that has grown smaller with each passing year. The walls whisper the echoes of choices I never understood, decisions I thought didn't matter. Until now. Have you ever felt it? The slow creeping awareness that time is not your friend, that life as you've known it, is quietly slipping through your fingers while you thought you were safe. I did. For decades, I told myself I was fine, that tomorrow would take care of itself, that my body, my mind, my world, they would always endure. But there was a secret I ignored, a truth so small, so invisible at the time, that I didn't even recognize it was there. And now, at the very edge of everything, I finally understand what I didn't know. What no one told me has been waiting quietly, for years, watching, waiting for the cracks to appear. You might be sitting there thinking this can't happen to you, that you've planned enough, prepared enough, that your world is untouchable. But the truth is, none of us are safe from what we ignore. I wish I could tell you that it's too late for me, but that would be a lie. It's not too late to see. It's too late to undo. And soon, you'll see why. Because what I discovered at 81 will change everything you think you know about your life. And it starts with a choice. I didn't realize I made a choice that set everything on this path. But before I can explain that choice, you need to understand the illusion I lived in. The screen should now feel uncomfortably still, waiting. The question lingers, what was that choice? For most of my life, I believed in safety. Not the kind that comes from locks or alarms, but the kind that whispers, nothing bad will happen here, not to you. I grew up in a world that rewarded planning, compliance, and predictability. School told me what to do. Work told me what to value. Society promised stability, if only I followed the rules. And so I did. I followed. I planned. I saved. I waited. For decades, my life felt like a fortress. My routines, my habits, my certainties, they were shields. I was untouchable. We tell ourselves these things. We cling to them like talismans against the chaos we refuse to see. We ignore the cracks in the foundation because they are inconvenient, because acknowledging them would mean accepting uncertainty. I wasn't alone in this illusion. Millions, perhaps billions, live inside the same fragile bubble. And why wouldn't we? There is comfort in denial. There is power in pretending that tomorrow will always obey our expectations. Yet, even in the most perfect facades, the first signs of trouble appear. Small, almost invisible, a missed warning, a quiet ache that can be ignored, a momentary unease brushed off as fatigue. I remember the first time it happened to me. I felt tired. Not the ordinary kind of tired that sleep can fix, a deep, bone-deep exhaustion, a weight pressing from inside. But I dismissed it. I told myself it was nothing, because admitting it would shatter the illusion, admitting it would force me to question everything I thought I knew. And so, like so many before me, I ignored the first whisper of danger. History is full of these moments. Nations that thought they were invincible, families that thought their love could endure anything, individuals who believed the rules of life were fixed. And yet beneath the surface the cracks were already forming. And then, almost imperceptibly, the first crack appeared in my world too. A warning I couldn't yet recognize. A subtle tremor that would, years later, feel like the moment everything began to unravel. I didn't see it for what it was. I couldn't. And that is how danger begins. Not with a roar, but with a whisper. What comes next is when the illusion finally starts to slip, and the world you thought was safe begins to betray you. At first the cracks were almost laughable. Small things, a missed signal, a slight pain, a forgotten appointment. I could explain them away. I did explain them away. We are all masters of rationalization. Our minds are trained to smooth over discomfort, to stitch over the frayed edges of our certainty. It sits nothing, we tell ourselves. It sits just age. It sits just stress. It sits just a phase. But cracks, no matter how small, have a way of spreading. Invisible lines widen under pressure. Tiny failures compound quietly, until one day you wake to find yourself standing on the edge of something you didn't even notice forming. I started losing focus. Little things. My memory of names, of dates, of appointments began slipping. I blamed busyness. I blamed exhaustion. I blamed myself. But the truth was darker. It was the first whisper of a reality I wasn't ready to face. People around me noticed too. Friends, family, some asked gently, others laughed nervously. Everyone forgets things, they said. Don't worry. And so I buried the warning signs under routine, under habit, under pride, because admitting the cracks were real would mean admitting that the fortress of my life, the one I had built so carefully, was already under siege. And yet, the cracks grew. Subtle at first, like hairline fractures in glass, but persistent. I felt the change in my energy, in my clarity, in the rhythm of my days. It wasn't dramatic. There were no alarms, no catastrophic events, just a quiet unease that I couldn't shake. Psychologists call this the denial threshold, the point at which we begin to sense danger, but refuse to name it. I had crossed that threshold without even realizing it, and every day I pretended nothing was wrong. The cracks widened. I wish I could tell you that awareness alone would have been enough, but awareness is not a shield. Awareness does not prevent what we refuse to confront. By the time I could no longer ignore them, the cracks had already whispered their warning to the universe, and they were preparing to grow into something far worse. The world I thought I understood, the life I thought was stable, was beginning to fracture, and I was still pretending it wasn't happening. What comes next is the moment denial meets reality, and the stakes rise beyond anything I had imagined. The cracks were no longer quiet. They shouted in ways I could no longer ignore. My body ached in unfamiliar ways. My mind stumbled through thoughts that used to come effortlessly. Friends began to notice, and their glances carried the weight of unspoken questions. And yet, denial is a powerful thing. It convinces you that the world is wrong, that the signs are exaggerated, that you are stronger than the evidence. I clung to it, as if sheer willpower could hold the fracture lines together. I watched others around me make the same mistakes. People in positions of authority assured us that everything was under control, that the system was stable, that there was no reason to panic. It sits normal, they said. It sits temporary. But when problems escalate, the language of reassurance is no longer comforting. It is dangerous. It lulls you into passivity, into believing that your fortress will withstand anything, even as the first real failures began to appear. I remember the day it hit me, a simple misstep that shouldn't have mattered, yet it exposed the fragility I had ignored for so long. Panic didn't follow, at least, not immediately. What followed was a hollowing sense of inevitability, like watching a storm gather in the distance while telling yourself it will pass. The denial wasn't just mine. It was everywhere. Family members, friends, colleagues, they all rationalized, excused, justified. Each explanation was a thread in a collective tapestry of ignorance, and together we wove a story that obscured the truth, even as the walls trembled. I saw the consequences, in small human ways, missed opportunities, forgotten moments, relationships strained by unseen pressures. And yet, the most terrifying part was not the failures themselves, but the realization that I had allowed them to grow. There were signs, always signs, but I chose to look away. I wanted normalcy, stability, comfort. I wanted life to continue exactly as I had imagined it. But life does not wait for our comfort. Life does not care for the illusions we create. And then came the heavy realization: denial is not just ignorance. Denial is a decision, and every decision we make to ignore reality carries a weight we cannot undo. I had been standing on the edge, watching the cracks spread, pretending they were nothing, and now the fractures had grown too large to ignore. What I did next, the choices I made in that moment of fear and stubbornness, would determine everything that followed. There is a moment in every life when the warning signs stop being subtle, when hesitation becomes dangerous, when ignoring reality is no longer an option. For me, that moment came quietly, almost imperceptibly. A choice, a single, seemingly small choice, sealed everything. I had the chance to act, to face the truth, to confront the fractures that had been growing for years. I could have sought help, admitted my limits, adjusted my life, my habits, my expectations, but I didn't stand. I convinced myself that I could manage, that my experience, my routine, my stubbornness was enough to hold the world together. I told myself, just a little longer, I'll handle it tomorrow. That is how point of no return moments happen. They don't arrive with sirens. They don't demand attention. They creep in under the guise of confidence, self-reliance, or habit, and by the time you recognize them, the path back is gone. I watched opportunities slip through my fingers, subtle at first, then undeniable. Friends offered support. Warnings appeared in the most mundane forms: a misstep in health, a forgotten obligation, a delayed response. Each one was a chance to turn back, to repair, to change course, and each time I ignored it. Pride, fear, and habit whispered, "It's fine, you're fine," until one day I realized there was no turning back. The consequences of years of denial, of inattention, of pretending were now irreversible. I felt a hollowing weight, an emptiness that no accomplishment, no planning, no success could fill. The moment had passed, and nothing could restore it. I was left with the full clarity of regret, the understanding of every warning I had ignored, every subtle tremor I had dismissed, every opportunity I had wasted, and the terrifying truth sank in: the life I thought I controlled had been slipping away while I was busy pretending it was safe. What comes next is the collapse, the slow, unavoidable descent that follows when the point of no return is crossed, and there is no saving yourself from the consequences you refuse to face. Once the point of no return is crossed, the world doesn't crash all at once. Collapse is never sudden. It comes slowly, silently, like a shadow stretching across a room you thought was filled with light. At first, it's confusion. Small things begin to falter. Tasks I once completed easily now feel impossible. Conversations slip through my mind. Appointments are missed. Simple decisions take monumental effort. And the fear grows. Not the panic of an instant disaster, but a creeping, gnawing dread. The kind that seeps into every corner of your existence. You begin to notice the fragility of things you once took for granted. Your health, your memory, your energy, your relationships. I tried to hold on to control, but control had already left the building. My attempts were fragile, patchwork solutions that only highlighted the growing emptiness. Each effort to stabilize myself reminded me how fragile my life had become. Others noticed too. Family, friends, neighbors, their concern is tinged with helplessness, because the collapse is not something they can stop. It is the natural consequence of years of ignored warnings and subtle fractures left to grow unchecked. I remember the nights spent staring into darkness, listening to the house settle, listening to my thoughts settle into the realization that nothing would be the same. Each day bled into the next, a slow unraveling. The routines that once defined me no longer held any meaning. There is a strange emptiness in watching your life collapse without the drama you expect. No explosions, no grand finales, just silence, confusion, and the quiet knowledge that what is happening is irreversible. And yet, in the midst of this unraveling, there is clarity. The clarity of consequences finally realized. Every choice, every ignored warning, every denial, it has led here. And there is no undoing it. I felt it then. The weight of years finally catching up. The inevitability of a life shaped by avoidance. And I understood, more clearly than ever, that collapse is not punishment. It is the natural result of what we refuse to see. What remains after the collapse is not just loss, but the truth of what could have been, if only I had acted differently. And that truth will follow me into the next part. The aftermath, the reflection, the moment where understanding finally sinks into the bones. After collapse, there is a strange silence, not the peaceful kind, but the hollow, echoing kind, the kind that fills every room and every thought with the weight of absence. I sit alone, surrounded by the remnants of a life I once controlled. Objects, memories, routines, all scattered, fractured, stripped of meaning. And in that emptiness, I finally hear the truth. The truth I avoided for decades. The truth I disguised with excuses, with pride, with habit. That life is not a guarantee. That time is not endless. That the smallest cracks, if ignored long enough, will swallow everything. I think back to the moments I could have acted differently. The moments where intervention, honesty, or simply awareness might have changed the course. Each one now feels like a doorway I chose not to open. And I realize understanding comes too late. Not because the lesson is impossible, but because life moves relentlessly forward, indifferent to our denial. Yet, in this reflection, there is a kind of bitter clarity. I see patterns now, the invisible threads connecting every choice, every hesitation, every ignored signal, and I see myself in them, fallible, stubborn, human. The emptiness is heavy. Yes, the regret is profound. But there is also a lesson. Carved into the quiet, we cannot escape the consequences of what we refuse to face. We cannot outrun the truth, no matter how long we pretend it does not exist. I wish someone had shown me the cracks earlier, had forced me to notice them before they grew into fractures, but no one did. And now I understand, too late. And the haunting part is this. The aftermath is not just about what is lost. It is about what remains in us, the awareness, the reflection, the heavy knowledge that life could have been different if only we had acted. What comes next is the final warning, the message I can no longer ignore, and it is not for me, it is for anyone still standing at the edge, still pretending the cracks are nothing. If you are listening, if you are watching, there is something you must understand before it is too late. Life will always seem stable until it isn't. The quiet moments, the routines, the comfort of believing tomorrow will always be safe. They are illusions, and illusions, if unchallenged, will betray you. I speak to you not from theory, not from observation, but from 81 years of experience. Every regret I feel, every crack I ignored, every denial I clung to, they have brought me here, and the weight of what I've learned is unbearable. Do not wait. Do not rationalize. Do not tell yourself that you have time to notice the cracks tomorrow, because tomorrow may never arrive in the way you imagine. Look at your life. Listen to your body, your mind, your instincts. Attend to the small warnings. Confront the subtle fractures. Act before the point of no return. Because once the collapse begins, there is no turning back. Once the consequences take hold, understanding comes too late to repair, too late to undo, too late to reclaim the moments that quietly slipped away while you thought you were safe. The lesson I learned at 81 is simple, yet horrifying. Life does not forgive denial. Life does not wait for clarity. Life does not stop for hesitation. And so, I tell you now, while you still can pay attention, act. Do not ignore the cracks, no matter how small, because if you do, One day, you will understand too. And by then, it will be too late.